Hi, and welcome back to the ADHD Friendly Podcast. I'm Patty Blinderman. I'm a professionally certified ADHD coach with over 10 years experience, and I have a passion of finding tools and resources that make my life more ADHD friendly, and I bring them here to share them with you in the hopes that it does the same in your life. Today, I've got a big topic, but I'm going to start off with a 23 in 2023 update and a subscriber update. Then I'm going to share a sibling celebration, and I'm going to share an ADHD friendly tip on acceptance and meeting your siblings where they are. And then my main topic is the impact of ADHD on siblings. So I'm going to share some of the challenges, some examples from my life, as well as some strategies to manage that with more ease. And then I'll highlight what's coming up in next week's episode, as I always do at the end of each podcast. All right, so let's kick it off with a 23 and 23 update. So this is kind of another celebration, which is why I'm starting with this at the top. I have continued my streak of checking off 23 minutes outside every day so far in 2023. So I'm super excited that that streak is going really strong. I'm feeling a little resistance, but I'm still managing to keep it sparkly. And then I'm really noticing a shift in my energy around my social goal to get at least 2 social outings, social connections each month. I'm doing really well with that. So I invited a friend from my knit group to lunch, and she said yes, which was very exciting. And I didn't even feel resistance. I thought of it and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to shoot her a text and I'm fine with whatever the outcome is. And it just felt really comfortable. And that was just something I noticed, and I wanted to acknowledge that I'm definitely building up my social muscle a bit. And I've continued going to my book club at my local library each month, and I'm reading a lot more because of it. So that's kind of like an added bonus to creating that structure. Is it's we're 2 months into 2023 and I've already read 10 books. I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't read this much in years. So I'm really enjoying that. And then I also wanted to update a subscriber in my YouTube channel update. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, I invite you to take the extra step and just subscribe, because here's my little subscriber count. You'll notice my number has gone down, but not really, because I get to flip the hundreds number to 2. Oh my gosh, you guys, like, again, I want a popper. I'm going to get a popper when it gets to 3, because it just feels so sparkly. So thank you so much for all of you that have taken this step to subscribe and check out the podcast. And I hope that the topics I continue to bring help you to create a life that's more ADHD friendly. So let's begin with my overall celebration for this podcast, and that is a sibling celebration, which feels really appropriate because my topic today is focused on the impact of having ADHD on siblings. So my 23 word is intention, and I shared in a previous podcast that I bought a term that says live with intention, and this has really helped me to think about things like, am I living within what I'm intending for this year? And so my sister called me last week on a Wednesday and invited me to join her in New York City the following day on a Thursday. She was going there for a conference. She was going to be there all weekend. If you've seen my podcast on travel tips, and she shared all of her packing tips, you know that she has been a flight attendant for more than 35 years. And because of that, she is able to offer some travel benefits to me. So she was like, you can fly one of my passes, and I've already got a hotel. And she really wanted me to go with her. And it was, 24 hours notice. She's much more able to be flexible like that than I am. Cognitive flexibility is not one of my strengths. It's actually a weaker skill for me. When I think about my the impact of my ADHD on my executive function skills, flexibility is definitely one that isn't as strong for me. And I'm aware of that. And I would say my sister's aware of that, because she was very, think about it, gave me time. And so she called me at like 2:30 in the afternoon. And I was, my knee-jerk response would be no, because, and the funny thing is, I'm more introverted. So I had nothing on my calendar that upcoming weekend, which should pave the path. Like, yeah, I got nothing going on. Let's do it. But for me, I love having nothing going on. The previous 4 weekends, I had something every Saturday. And so I was looking forward to a commitment-free weekend. But I said, let me think about it. Give me a little bit of time. And I asked for all the information I would need, the flight information and, time to look at my schedule and really, I always say, experience my schedule, really look at what I had coming up. And I was also aware she asked me on her birthday. So I was thinking, okay, it's her birthday and she's going out of town for the weekend. And we were supposed to meet up last summer and I canceled that. I can't remember why, like what came up that got in the way. But I kind of had that in the back of my mind, like, oh, wouldn't it feel good to be able to say yes? So I just gave myself time. I went to my knit group. It was my knit group day. And I kept thinking about it. And I did look at my calendar before I left. And I was just giving myself a chance to think about it. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to say yes. Can't even think of a good reason to say no. And I know it would be fun. And I know I would regret it. So my intention is to have more time, more meaningful connection with those I love. And that, that connection to my word for the year, intention, really also helped me to remember, what is my intention? Am I living within my intentions? And so I called her back. It was about 3 hours after she asked, which for me is pretty quick to change my mind from a no, my knee-jerk response, to a, you know what, let's do it. And she was so surprised. And that was actually almost more fun than the whole weekend. But I said yes, and I went, and we had a fabulous time. And so I'm just going to hold up a picture here of us together. My sister there in red. We had dinner together and we took a picture, and it was just a lovely weekend. So that's going to lead right into my next part of my podcast, where I share an ADHD friendly tip. Today, I'm going to be sharing a tip. And my tip is to meet your siblings where they are. So acknowledge your own tendencies as well as what you know about your siblings. So this is more, from a lifetime of being sisters. I want to acknowledge I have ADHD. My sister is not diagnosed with ADHD. And so I know my tendencies in relation to that and what my default modes tend to be. So when she invited me to go to New York City with her, she really wanted me to go see MJ, the musical, Michael Jackson, the musical. I am a lifelong Michael Jackson fan. I was so into him when I was in high school. And my sister was never really into him, but she went to see the play when it opened in New York, and she's now seen it 3 times. And my sister has seen a ton of musicals, and she says, hands down, this is her favorite musical ever. And Miles Frost, who plays the lead of Michael Jackson, just won the Tony Award for his role. And she's like, oh my gosh, Patty, you have to see it. You have to see him. We'll try to get tickets if you come to New York. So that helped me also to say yes to going. And we decided to try Thursday night, because I went on Thursday like we planned. And we went 45 minutes before the show started to make sure that there wouldn't be an understudy for him that night. She really wanted me to see it with him as the lead role. And she was afraid he wouldn't be there much longer because he won the Tony. And so I was like, okay, I'd love to see the original cast. I've never been to a play where the original cast was still doing the performances. So we went 45 minutes before. We went up to the ticket office, and she asked before we bought the tickets if Miles Frost was there, to make sure there was no understudy. And they confirmed, yes, he was there. And so we bought the tickets and waited in line. And then when we went inside, it was probably about 8-10 minutes before the show was going to start. We sat down and I was like so excited. We had good seats. We got a decent deal because we bought them same day. And when we got in our seats and sat down, they gave us the playbill. And I had this little piece of paper sticking out of it. And my sister immediately saw it. She's like, oh my gosh, what is that? What does that say? And she didn't have her glasses on. And so I pulled it out, and it said the role of MJ was going to be played by an understudy. So I know I just, shared a minute ago how I'm not very flexible. That's not a strong executive function skill for me. Now, I've never seen the show. So I was okay. I was disappointed, but I didn't know what the difference would be because I didn't see the show already with him. My sister had seen it 3 times with him. So I could tell, while I would be okay with it, my sense was she was working really hard to try to shift her flexibility to be okay with it. She really wanted me to do the show, but it wasn't the person that we really went there to see perform as Michael Jackson. And it really only took me a minute or two of, kind of listening to her process and try to figure out how to be okay with it, that I just turned to her and I said, Chris, this isn't what you wanted me to do. You wanted me to come and see Miles Frost as Michael Jackson. We could get a refund and try again tomorrow. And she was like, really? Are you really okay with that? And I was like, absolutely. Because I knew my sense was that if I expected her just to be okay with it and tolerate somebody else in the lead role, when that wasn't what she was so excited for me to experience, that wasn't going to be something she was going to be able to easily do. And it wasn't something I was going to be able to easily support her to do, because I was okay with it. But at the same time, I understood her passion for wanting me to see Miles Frost. So we went back, we got a refund. They told us the next night was sold out, which was Friday night. But we decided to just, show up again 45 minutes beforehand and just take our chances. We went the next night, 45 minutes before showtime, asked again, is there any understudies for the lead roles? And they said there was an understudy for the young MJ. There's 3 different actors that play Michael Jackson at 3 different time periods in his life, like, young Jackson 5 MJ, and then there's like a Jackson's MJ who's like in his teens, and then Miles Frost plays the main Michael Jackson character as an adult. And they said that, just a young MJ has the understudy. And so we went ahead and bought, they had 2 tickets that somebody else had turned in. So we had 2 tickets. They ironically were literally the seats directly next to the seats that we were sitting in the night before that we got refunded. And again, we sat down, again, they handed us the playbill. Again, it had a white sheet of paper sticking out of it. And she, was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, okay, let's just see. And we looked, and none of the understudies were for MJ, the main character. There was just the understudy for young Michael Jackson. And so I was like, okay, we decided when we went back that as long as Miles Frost was there, we were going to stop. We were going to see the show no matter who else the understudies might be. The main thing was that he was there. So it really ended up being an amazing experience. I can totally see why she wanted so much for that actor to be there for the performance. I don't know, I'll be really curious when the show goes on the road, how they pull it off with different people playing him, because he sounded like him, he moved like him, he looked like him. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. My souvenir, I bought a little Michael Jackson the musical bag. It was just a fabulous experience that really came about because I think we both honored what we knew about each other, and I allowed give my sister the grace to just say, let's not stay. Let's do the refund on Thursday night, come back and try Friday night, and really be okay if we weren't able to see it, because it wasn't going to be what she wanted me to see. So I really met her where she was. I understood what would have been easy or hard for her, what we could tolerate, what we couldn't tolerate. And we were able to manage expectations for each other because of that. And that's definitely been something we've worked on over the years. And I would say it's brought us a lot closer together, because we've both learned how to really acknowledge we're different human beings. We approach things almost completely oppositely of each other, but we've really learned how to work with each other in a way that works for both of us. And that's my ADHD friendly tip, just to, really meet your sibling where they are whenever possible, and not have expectations that they can't succeed with. All right. And so here is a picture of my sister and I at MJ the musical. And I was so excited when I realized that he was there, and I didn't do this the Thursday night, but I did it Friday night. Took just a fun picture. I just stood up in front of the stage really quickly before everybody took their seats, and was just so excited. It was just, now I look at it, I didn't understand the whole backdrop because I hadn't seen it yet. And now I'm like, it was such a cool, little like screen that they had in front of the stage before the show started. So on to our topic for today, and that is the impact of ADHD on siblings. Now, this comes from an Attitude magazine. It was inspired by, Attention. Attention magazine. This is the February 2023 issue, and it's from an article entitled, "It's Never About Me, Strategies to Meet the Hidden Needs of Siblings of Kids with ADHD." And it was written by Jane Indergaard, who is a RN and an associate professor of nursing. All right, so I'm going to talk about challenges, and they include disruption and exhaustion, reduced quality of life, impaired relationships in the family and beyond, and confusing emotional conflict. So I'm going to break them down. I'm going to read a bit from this article, and then I'm going to share some strategies and examples from my life. So the first is disruption and exhaustion. And for this, what she says is that the overwhelming adjective that was described among siblings in an ADHD household revealed ongoing daily disruption of family life, including high levels of conflict, emotional arousal, and household chaos. Siblings reported annoying, frustrating behaviors, being victims of aggression or manipulation from the sibling with ADHD, and reciprocal events of victimizing or being aggressive toward their affected sibling. So in short, the ADHD behaviors of their sibling could bring out the worst in them. So even if they didn't, a lot of times siblings can have ADHD, but it can, at least in my family, it impacts them very, very differently. But they're talking about here specifically neurotypical kids who have a sibling that has ADHD, and even the kids that aren't impacted, say it brings out the worst in them, they might end up bullying or behaving aggressively towards the child that has ADHD. I know as a parent, I often felt like some of the challenges of some of my kids impacted by ADHD brought out my worst parenting styles. And it was something I really had to do a lot of work on to improve, because I didn't like who I was when I wasn't in control of my emotions and I would get frustrated. So that's number one. The other challenge, number two, is reduced quality of life. So for this one, they say siblings in the household experienced family life as focused and dependent upon the child with ADHD. Their own comfort, satisfaction, well-being, and happiness was perceived as obscured by the needs and the attention required by their neurodiverse sibling. And this can create feelings of isolation, unappreciation, and even rejection. So again, I know, as parents, it's not our intention to kind of tune out the kids that don't have the squeaky wheel, like the need that can't be ignored. But often it really is just because the impact is so much more that it's automatically requiring more energy and focus to be given to that sibling. Number three, impaired relationships in the family and beyond. So children that are not affected to that degree by ADHD or have no diagnosis of ADHD reported that parents were chronically stressed, preoccupied, and perceived to engage in differential parenting treatment and discipline. So their sense of fairness in time, attention, and expectations left the unaffected sibling feeling jealous, victimized, and taken for granted. They also described being keenly aware of the judgment of neighbors, friends, and extended family members, as ADHD behaviors can incite negative social interaction. Oh my gosh, just reading this brings me back to countless times where I was aware, whether or not it was real, I perceived judgment from teachers, from my own family members, extended family. I remember we lived far away from my family. The entire time we were raising our kids, we lived in a different state than the rest of my family. And for a large part of that time, I actually thought it was kind of a benefit, because they didn't see enough of the behaviors to really get a strong sense of the ongoing challenges. I thought of it as protecting my impacted kids more, and trying to not have people judge them based on one instance, which was harder because we didn't live near them. So if one visit there was some behavioral challenges, then I tended to think that they would go away kind of labeling them as, oh, well, that kid really doesn't listen, or whatever it is. So it had benefits and it had challenges. But overall, I would say it was easier to raise them out of the spotlight of extended family, because I could manage the behaviors without feeling judged myself as a parent a little bit more easily. Okay, number 4 is confusing emotional conflict. And for that, they say siblings of children with ADHD describe significant conflict between feelings of anger and resentment and those of sadness, loss, anxiety, guilt, and worry for their exhausted parents and struggling sibling. They also reported feeling an overwhelming sense of powerlessness and sorrow about not having a normal family life, and guilt for not having the same issues as their impacted sibling. And I also think that that is absolutely something that each of my kids has talked about at different times, related to the siblings that were more impacted. So what do we do about that? What are some strategies? So I want to share the strategies from the article, and I'm going to share personal examples in the hopes that it gives you a little context or something to maybe build on for yourself. Strategy number one, absolutely, I agree with this, education. Get informed. I was a former special education teacher. I really did think I understood ADHD. When my first kid was diagnosed, I didn't even believe it because I didn't see it. And then they explained that he had cognitive hyperactivity. He wasn't kind of, bouncing around and, unable to sit still. His brain was racing, and I had never heard of that. And so I knew I had to learn and figure out how to support him better. And so I started training to become an ADHD coach. And that understanding that it gave me to go through those courses created more patience and empathy for my kids. As more of them got diagnosed, I started seeing much more impact. I was like, oh, okay. So instead of judging, I was able to kind of acknowledge where they were and see beyond the behavior that was being displayed. So I was really able to pause more easily, not 100%. I still got incredibly frustrated, but I was able to pause a bit more and really step back and ask myself, what's going on underneath this? Where's the behavior coming from? And so that gave me an explanation, not an excuse. So I always say, understanding what's going on isn't an excuse for the behavior and for, they just, struggle with this. So we're just going to let them spiral out of control here. No, but it gives you an explanation for what's going on and why this is challenging and what can we do to create a little bit more ease in dealing with it. So a strategy it can be to have a script or scripts, plural, ready to explain challenging behaviors to reduce that stigma. This can be really helpful for siblings, but I would say even as a parent, especially as I've shared, like I have weak working memory. So in the moment, I'll forget what it is I'm going to say. So I call these like back pocket kind of phrases. And I would literally like write it down if I felt like this might come up before a play group or something. So I would be able to connect it. So I always try to make it a really simple thing to explain. So something like, kid A needs glasses to be able to see the board in the classroom, and kid B has ADHD, and they need medication in order to be able to pay attention because their brain's just wired differently. And just, kind of normalizing it and leveling out that playing field so that it's just, this is what's going on, and it's not, kind of creating discomfort. It's explaining what's going on and having that language. And for siblings, that same kind of story can help to, again, give them an explanation for it instead of feeling uncomfortable. And unfortunately, a lot of times siblings can feel ashamed or embarrassed and isolated. So it normalizes it and gives them some context to have a script. Excuse me. Number two, awareness. So I really tried to stay connected to what I wanted my kids to remember and to carry forward in their lives. And so the example that I'm going to share is modeling. I really tried to model owning my mistakes. We all make mistakes. And I think, the more that we set our kids up to see us as being without fault, being perfect, first of all, it's not true. It's not sustainable, but it also doesn't teach them to own their own mistakes. And if you have a household with kids that are impacted by ADHD, they're probably making more mistakes than neurotypical kids. And I think it's really important to model, like we all make mistakes, we continue, that's how we learn. And so my example that I'm going to share is kind of a painful memory for me, but I did learn a lot from it and I did own it. So when one of my kids that's more impacted by ADHD, when they were 12, they refused to go to, we always go to Christmas Eve, we go to church together, and they refused. They were in tears and said that they just couldn't do it. They were really anxious about it. And I was like, well, this is what we do as a family. Christmas, isn't just about the gifts. We're going to go. And they were putting their foot down, like, no, I can't do it. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And so I said, tried not to get into an argument and just kind of laid out the consequences. I'm like, fine, if you don't go, then they always get 3 Santa gifts when they were younger. And so I said, one of your Santa gifts will be taken away. So you only have 2 Santa gifts this year. And they accepted that consequence. They're like, fine. And I don't want to go. And they were crying and they were sad and I was frustrated. And so I actually resented needing to hold that boundary. I was aware of it the whole time that we were at church. I was really holding on to that. And Christmas is my absolute favorite holiday. So I remember feeling really resentful about needing to pick a gift to take away and needing to hold that consequence. I was really good at holding consequence, like staying true to what I said would happen. Not always, a helpful thing, but it was something that, I did. So I was like, okay, I have to hold this boundary. I said, this is what was going to happen. And I did it. And so it wasn't the best Christmas. It wasn't, I have like a lot of mixed feelings about that Christmas. I remember it very well. And after I started ADHD coach training, it was probably, 6 or 9 months after that, that I really started to come to understand ADHD brain wiring and how it shows up and what it looks like in real life. And I learned about something called anticipatory boredom. So that sense of perceiving something that's coming up is going to be boring. And for this kid, it was, church. And it's a long, when you think about how ADHD can impact our sense of time, it can feel like it's going to go forever. And it's just too much to tolerate. And when I really did understand that, I just felt awful. And I had to go back and own it. And I had a long conversation with the kiddo that didn't go and I had the consequence for, and talked about how, when we understand and know better, we do better. And that I felt like, we talked about it and they were able to, share in their words what it was like and why it was so hard. And it really resonated with what I was learning about ADHD. And so I came to a new understanding of it wasn't just the behavior they're exhibiting, like, I don't want to go and just being difficult. It was really the perceived amount that they were going to have to tolerate in terms of boredom. And ADHD brains are wired for interest. So that perception of boredom was just too much to overcome at that point in their life. And so I apologized. I owned it. I apologized to all of the kids because, individually, because it impacted all of them, because I was definitely not my best self that day, that holiday. So just wanted to share that example in case it's helpful in any scenarios that might play out in your family. All right, strategy number 3, communication. Communication is more urgent in families that there's ADHD in the mix, especially among siblings. It's more urgent to offset the perceived unfairness that I talked about a little bit earlier of the different treatment on the part of parents. So I always said, because fairness is something that the kids used to always be really focused on. And I always focused on highlighting that fair doesn't mean equal, and that each child has structure and boundaries that are appropriate for them, because I want them to succeed. But it didn't mean that they were the same or equal, or they would happen at the same age. So if you can do this at age 5, maybe the other one wasn't ready at age 5. And so I'm going to share just 2 examples. One of my kiddos was born with an amazing sense of direction. Like literally you could drop them somewhere, like you can be at a mall or something and lose track of them. And I came to learn pretty quickly, they know where they are. They could tell me where they are, help me not get lost. I really came to discover I couldn't lose them if I wanted to. They were just so strong in their sense of direction. They just understood how to get around. I have another kiddo who would get lost in the yard. Put him in the backyard and they couldn't find the back door. And so they had different boundaries, different things I would allow them to do in terms of going out into the neighborhood and things on their own when they were old enough, because one I knew would never get lost. It wouldn't be an issue. And the other, I had to make sure that they were always with somebody else, that they wouldn't get lost, because they would get lost on their own. And then another example is sleepovers. Some of my kiddos were ready at 10 to start having sleepovers, and others, they could not handle that, or they would stay up all night and we would literally pay for it for days because they would be so dysregulated from the lack of sleep. And it would take a couple of days to get back on schedule. So it was just like, okay, yeah, we're not going to do that again until they had more awareness of the impact of staying up and connecting it to the consequence, which took a while. So it was just, always important for us to say that equal doesn't mean fair. All right. Number 4, this is the final strategy, and it has to do with time. And there's 3 aspects that have to go into this. And so we address time by focusing on distributing time in one of 3 ways. The first is one-on-one time. So the quote from the article is, adult children frequently reported individual time with their parent was the most important factor in helping to build or repair the relationship. I didn't, this is research. I literally just read this article. I do know a lot about it from my coach training, but when my kids were really small and I knew the impact was pretty big on the siblings not as impacted by ADHD, I really had to focus on what can I do to minimize that. And so the first thing was prioritizing one-on-one time. So we had something that we called first weekends. And first weekends were activities with just 1 or 2 kids. First weekend of the month, we kind of divide and conquered, where my husband would take like the boys and I would take the girls, or we would split up, if we could, and just do 1 kid on Saturday, 1 kid on Sunday. And my husband would do the same, 1 kid on Saturday, 1 kid on Sunday. So they'd each have one-on-one time. And then the following month we'd switch. So then whoever had dad the month before would get mom this month, and vice versa. We also would do read aloud. I was always reading to them at bedtime. And so I would go in and read whatever books were their favorites. And that was one of my favorite times of day, was getting that time by themselves, just to, it was just a 5-minute quick story with each one of them. It was like 20 minutes to get through because I have 4 kids, but it was really meaningful time that they look forward to and I look forward to. And I remember there was each year for a few years running, I read the book Where the Red Fern Grows to 1 kid at a time. Each summer I would read it to a different kid until I had read it individually to each of them. And that was a lot of fun. It was really, they got a kick out of it because I cried every time I read it. And even before things would happen, I would cry just when they would describe the dogs, and I would just start crying, and I couldn't read while I was crying, and they always got a kick out of that. I also go on walks, and that's something I still do with my kids independently, and play games. The games that they could play successfully, which really varied from the time they were little. Even to today, there are certain games I play with certain kids and not with other kids. Okay, the second type of time is family time. So family activities that everyone can succeed and enjoy. So examples are like game night. Again, I've shared before, I love board games. My kids I just don't have a family that does really well with family game night. I tried it for a long time. Now that they're all, older, I can succeed sometimes. Monopoly has been pretty good. Like, there's certain things that we can do, but it's really a short list of games that we can play as an entire family. But I really do encourage keeping a list, because if there's a game that works for your family, write it down so you don't have to, try to remember what was it that we played that everybody really had enjoyed and we all had a lot of fun. And even maybe keep a list of games that don't work well, so that you're not making the same choices and kind of setting them up to get frustrated. Movie night was always something that we did pretty successfully, and we like to rotate. So who got to pick the movie? And the rule was just, you need to pick a movie that you genuinely believe everybody's going to like. So it can't be, this is my favorite movie and we're going to watch, I don't even know, something that nobody else would ever watch. So if you like horror movies or something and nobody else wants to watch it, or whatever it is, or like little kids that are into like Power Rangers or something and nobody else wants to watch it. And then we did something I called happy hour when the kids were little, which was just milkshakes. I would make milkshakes and I would have little like the can of whipped cream that they could squirt on top of their milkshake, and sprinkles for them to add on top, cherry sauce if they wanted to add chocolate sauce. And I did that every Friday we made pizza. We'd always have pizza and happy hour. And they really got a kick out of that. And it was a time they all sat, like I had like a little bar top, and they would sit at the bar and make their little sundaes and sit and drink them. And it was, or the milkshakes, I should say. And it was just fun. It was like a nice little activity that we could do together. Okay. And the third type of time is away time. Remember, having a sibling or siblings with ADHD is really draining. And we want to look at how can we improve the chance that they're going to be able to recharge their batteries and get along. because it's that, I always think of it like it's fatiguing over time. So we need to give them a break. And for siblings, that can be maybe they're going over to a friend's house for sleepovers. Maybe they have, if you have relatives nearby, an aunt or an uncle or grandparents that they can go and hang out with on their own. So they're getting a break. I know even for me, thinking about who would share bedrooms, it was always very strategic because there were certain combinations that just wouldn't work, or where the bedrooms are located. If like one kid was more impacted and really just needed space, I would put them, in the bedroom that maybe was a little further down the hall to give them a little bit more of a sound buffer if that was going to impact them more and drain them more. So just thinking about those things to even if they can't get away, because like I said, we didn't have family nearby. So I had to think about how to create buffers within the family to be able, within the household, to be able to give them a little bit of a break to be able to recharge. And then for parents, so the emotional health of the primary caregiver is essential. I want to just highlight that it can be really isolating. It feels very alone when you're parenting children who are impacted by ADHD. And it can feel as though others don't understand, or like they're judging, or like you're the only one that's experiencing this. It just feels so isolating. It can be really scary. I used to always say, like, I can spiral down to my kids in a box, living on the side of the street, from one little meltdown. I'm like, what's going to happen if they don't overcome this? And I would like literally, take them all the way down to they'll never finish school. And if they never finish school, they'll never get a job. And if they never get a job, like all the way down. It's very stressful. And I used to literally feel so, every time the phone rang, so emotionally triggered, thinking, is that school? Are they calling because there's some kind of a problem that I'm going to have to go in? And I just remember for years, the phone ringing was just overwhelming. So research indicates that the emotional health of the primary caregiver is the single most important factor for positive family well-being and relationships in families raising a child with ADHD. That's a quote. So it's essential to take care of your physical needs and your emotional needs. Address any mental health issues that, if you're feeling really undue stress or anxiety, or even depression, getting those needs met, going and seeing a professional to get whatever support you need. And really allowing yourself to take a break from your child. I used to have a girlfriend's weekend every quarter when the kids were little that I had to look forward to. I had a call with my best friends at least once a week that we would, just pick up the phone, and I knew that there was somebody on the other end that wasn't going to judge me, and I could just vent and connect and have a sense of a break. And I was really strong in having boundaries around sleep. I've talked about this before, where I really made sure that they had, their own rest time in the afternoon, regardless of whether or not they napped. They had time by themselves in their room, and I had time just to recharge, so I'd be ready for the rest of the day. And they had really strict bedtimes, so that I would have time in the evenings that I knew I could kind of punch out. I was done parenting, and I could have a little bit of time before I went to sleep to get up to do it all over again. So really focusing on, what you need to be able to recharge your own batteries as a parent so you can support your children. And then remember, keep learning all you can about ADHD. It really is the key to unlocking so many tools to help you support yourself and your family. All right, now for just a really quick recap. At the top of the episode, I shared some of my 23 and 23 updates that are going really well with my walking outside and my social outings and connections challenge. I now have 201 subscribers. Woohoo! Thank you. And I shared a sibling celebration that I went to New York City with my sister, and we saw MJ the musical and just had a lovely time. And then I shared my ADHD friendly tip to meet siblings where they are in order to manage expectations and really support your relationship with your siblings. And then my main topic for today was the impact on siblings in households with ADHD. And I shared some of the challenges as well as some of the strategies that can support it with more ease. And next time, in my next episode, I'm going to be talking about the 4 tendencies. This is a book by Gretchen Rubin, and I'm going to highlight what the 4 tendencies are, which are obliger, upholder, questioner, or rebel. And we'll dive into what each of those looks like and some strategies to support you, whatever tendency you might have. That's all for this episode of the ADHD Friendly Podcast. Remember, as always, take what works for you and leave the rest. If I shared something that just doesn't resonate, absolutely just drop it aside. If something did help, how will you remember? What prompt will you need to capture it so you remember you want to use it to support yourself? And if you like this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. And if you haven't started your ADHD Friendly Owner's Manual yet, please check out my website, ADHDfriendly.com, for lots of resources to get you started on yours. Until next time, tally ho.